All right, let's talk about these COVID death numbers now.
Yes. So we would like to highlight the content of Dr. John Campbell because he released a video over the last 24 hours that highlights specifically the difference between people who died of COVID in the UK in 2021 versus people who died with COVID, and the numbers are actually quite stark. Now, when you look at overall deaths that the government has been reporting of people who had COVID mentioned on their death certificate, meaning they had it, but they actually then died not of it, but with it, it's quite a different thing, right? It's quite a different story.
Imagine that.
Yes. So if you pull up the deaths of people and you actually parse it out by age, you notice there is a stark difference of people who died. Oh, the total deaths. These are deaths of COVID, right? Whereas the government was reporting in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, 174,000.
But then when the data was released by based on a Freedom of Information Act, it showed that the deaths from COVID were much lower than deaths reported overall, right? And if you parse it out by quarter, you see in Q1, the total deaths, again, this is of COVID, not with COVID. These are caused by people who were otherwise healthy, but then died with COVID, was 6,493 in just the first quarter. And then deaths continue to rise. We don't have the full number for Q4 yet because we have only just a few weeks past it. But you see the majority of it. I should have put the percentages here, but the majority of these deaths are people over 65, right? This is not a beautiful chart. Maybe we bring that down. We just made this for our talking points.
This is for our purposes internally. But, if we look at the data from what England was telling us, and by the way, these are UK numbers specifically. So this is UK numbers, okay? And the only reason we even learned about these specific numbers is because of a Freedom of Information Act request that was done about a month ago. So we actually found out from the government in the UK who were the people that actually died of COVID specifically with no underlying other conditions, right? No other comorbidities, and what were their ages. And overwhelmingly, first of all, the numbers are really, really small. I guess that's the number one takeaway here, is that these numbers are really small, right? Think about it in the height of it in 2020, right? 9,000 deaths, right? These are over 64.
When the government reported it was over 100,000.
I'm sorry, over 65. Yeah. So what they were saying then was 127,000, right? But when in actuality, it was 7,000.
Right.
Okay. So then when you compare that to, let's look at flu deaths, right?
Now, we don't have 2020 here. I took this from the database of the National Health. Flu deaths were, it's so when people like to say, oh, it's just like the flu. It's not, right? So when you look at overall 2021, total deaths was close to 8,000. And then you look at flu deaths in 2019, just 2 years before, total flu deaths in the UK were about 1,200. So that is many orders of magnitude worse than the flu, but it is not 100,000 people dying of COVID. It is 100,000 people dying with COVID, much like my father-in-law, right? He died of other causes, but he was diagnosed positive COVID, and we still don't know whether or not the government counted him as a COVID death or not. It's very possible. He also was 86 years old and in a hospital.
Right. And he went into the hospital without COVID, got COVID while he was in the hospital.
Yes.
So, but this is really amazing to think about these deaths, that what the government had been telling us, this is the UK government, 127,000 deaths, 135,000 deaths. When you then remove comorbidities from it, and you just specifically look and ask for them to give you the data on people dying specifically of COVID with no underlying pre-existing conditions when they went in and had this or were specifically categorized as a death from COVID, the numbers are pretty amazing. I mean, actually kind of jaw-dropping if you think about it.
Yes.
Well, and recently the CDC director just said that, the majority of deaths in the United States came with people with 4 or more comorbidities. Like, she said that just recently.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and then she's walked it back, and whether or not it was selectively edited by ABC News, it's hard to say whether or not that was specifically how that related. But yeah, over 75%, she says, were with comorbidities, 4 or more comorbidities.
Now,
but I bet you will never see that info here in the U.S., even with
perhaps.
a FOIA request.
No, and Dr. Campbell points out in his video, he said, look, no one's really reported this. I haven't seen the BBC report it. I went through the Guardian's website. I didn't see it. The Sun,
Daily Mail.
The Daily Mail. I didn't see it reported in any of the major news outlets in the UK. And this Freedom of Information Act request came out a month ago.
It's funny how his personality is so non-alarmist. He's like, this is very shocking data to me. I'm surprised. No, but he's not mad about it.
And
he's just like, you take it.
Oh, I know it looks like spring outside, but
he's like, let's look at the birds so we don't all get too upset. And I was like, but I'm already there.
Yeah.
But you know what? What's funny is after this, on the heels of this information, the UK just released all the vaccine passports. They said you can go to work now, you can go outside. And I wonder if it has anything to do with this data.
As maybe. If they didn't already know.
Well, right. I think maybe, but I also think politics is at play here too. You've got, you've got a situation right now with Boris Johnson, who is hanging on literally by tenterhooks right now. And probably if they have a vote of no confidence, he will be out of a job for his partying during COVID and telling the country not to be partying. So he could be very close to being out of a job. And this is the government basically saying, we know you're all sick of this. Fine. No more restrictions. Just go.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some politics involved in this as well. Maybe the data too, and they're leaning on some of this data to say, all right, it's not as bad as we thought.
Well, it's funny how this lands on us after being told for so long, don't say that it's like the flu. Don't say that it's only for elderly people. Don't say that it's because of comorbidities.
Don't tell people to eat healthier.
Because if you say those things, you're a COVID denier, right?
Right.
But here's the data in black and white that makes all of those things true, whether you believe it or not, whether you want to think the pandemic is still raining down on all of us, ready to kill us all. It doesn't matter anymore when you actually have the data. And it doesn't make you a crazy right-wing, MAGA hat wearing the pandemic is not real. Right. And so we like to sort of put people in these boxes, but the data does bear out that, yes, it's worse than the flu, but yes, it also does affect elderly people and people with comorbidities more. And it is less likely than you think to take out a otherwise healthy person.
Well, right. and that, again, also makes the whole argument for the jab fall apart because they're from kids to a certain age. 5 and up. I mean, that narrative completely falls apart with these numbers.
Yes, you are right. And I feel very uncomfortable with you saying that, but I have to hear it because that's true. Right? So, yeah, you're right.
But we've been told about this, and again, we've reported these numbers that come out of Johns Hopkins and others. And so, again, what exactly is it, and where are hospitals being incentivized to write certain things on death certificates so that they're getting more money as a result of it, or more federal funding because they have a number of cases in these particular hospitals, and a lot of those questions. And I think this is, only time will tell as we get more of these Freedom of Information Act requests. And look, there's also some interesting reporting too that I would like to really have a post-mortem of how did Sweden handle this? Right. A country that said, we're not doing anything.
Yes.
What is the postmortem looking like on that? There's some interesting reporting that's now coming out about how Sweden was like, we're just going to not do anything.
Yes.
How did they end up faring in all of this? And I want to see those postmortem assessments of this. I don't know that we'll be able to get it within 1 year, but maybe over 5 years, we'll be able to look back on this with some reflection.
Yeah.
Another number that he mentioned that I thought was kind of curious was that the average death age of people from COVID was 82 and a half years old, right? And he said the average lifespan was actually higher than the average lifespan, which was 79 in men and 84, I believe, in women. So
wow, that went over my head.
Yeah. Wait, say that stat again.
So the average age of people who passed away from COVID was 82 and a half years old. The average lifespan is 79 in men and 84 in women, so it actually was about the same as the average lifespan.
Huh. He also pointed out that in the UK alone, And again, you can extrapolate this data because the numbers seem to be replicated in the United States, that an additional 50,000 people within the next year will die of cancer because, and this is conjecture, but he thinks is that it is due to people not getting scanned for cancer, missing chemotherapy treatments due to pandemic lockdowns, or specifically not trying to get diagnosed as undiagnosed cancers that are too progressed. So that's terrifying because you cannot ignore your otherwise important health appointments, right? Health scans, health screens, any other, and that is something that will be an unintended consequence. So
right. So we will link up to that video of Dr. John Campbell in the description after our show today, so you can watch that video specifically.